Is there any reason to set the white balance in your camera when shooting RAW files? Well, yes and no. I'm going to explain on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. If you've got a photo question, you know what to do. You just go to askdavidbergman.com and submit that form right there on the site. I just might pick your question and answer right here on a future show. Quick reminder that if you're watching this video right when it's posted in early July 2023, I'm almost done with the North American leg of my Shoot from the Pit live concert photography workshops on the Luke Combs Tour. There are 4 cities left with 2 workshops in each one of those cities. Now remember, these are stadiums, giant stadium concerts, and you're going to learn how to photograph while in that incredible environment. Then next month, I'm going to be in New Zealand and Australia, and then Europe after that. So wherever you want to join me, head to shootfromthepit.com after you watch this video, of course, for more info and to sign up. Okay, today's question was sent in by Mo R, and he wants to know, regarding white balance, since most of us shoot in RAW, should we really care about changing the white balance mode on the camera or just correct in post-processing? Also, should we use a gray card, or is there no need since we can correct in post? Thanks. It's a good question, Mo. Thanks so much for sending it in. First, let's talk a bit about white balance and how it works in a digital camera. The white balance setting is simply used to control the overall color of our images. Everything we see in real life is being lit by some kind of a light source. It might be something natural like the sun or the moon, or it could be a man-made source like a light bulb. Either way, whether you realize it or not, the light that comes from each source is a different color, and that color can be measured by referring to its temperature. That temperature isn't measured in Fahrenheit or Celsius, it's on the Kelvin scale. Now, sunlight in the middle of the day has a color temperature of right around 5,600 degrees Kelvin and is generally considered to be neutral with no unnatural color cast. So white looks like white. Tungsten bulbs, however, put out light at lower temperatures around 3,200 degrees Kelvin, and that's a warmer color than daylight. So white is actually more yellow or orange under tungsten light. And at the other end of the spectrum, higher temperatures above 5,600 begin to get colder and more blue. Now, we don't always realize this because our eyes and brain do an amazing job of neutralizing all those different colors so that white always looks like white, even under mixed lighting conditions. Cameras, however, aren't quite as good as our brain, at least not yet, and so we need to tell it how to handle different light sources to get the color that we want in our photographs. Sometimes we do that simply to have the colors look neutral, like our eyes see it, and other times it's to change the color for artistic or creative reasons. Now, the white balance setting works by compensating for the color temperature of the light source. It does this by shifting the colors to where you want them to be. The spectrum of visible light can move along a scale from cold through neutral and into warm. Most cameras let us do this shift by offering preset Kelvin temperatures for common light sources like daylight, fluorescent, incandescent, and tungsten. They even have shade and cloudy since daylight is a little colder under those conditions. So you can just set the preset for the light that you're shooting in, and it's going to get pretty close to neutral. Now, another option is auto white balance. In auto, the camera analyzes the scene and makes an educated guess about the color temperature of the light source based on the information from the sensor. It does a pretty good job in most cases, but it can be fooled, especially if there are multiple light sources of varying color. That's really tricky for the camera to figure out. Now, you can also set an exact number of degrees Kelvin if you want more control. As you dial the temperature up, the image gets warmer. Now, I know that seems backwards from what I said before. I said that warmer light, like tungsten, is actually a lower temperature around 3,200. But by setting the color temperature of your camera, what you're doing is telling it what the temperature is of the light, and then it's compensating by shifting everything in the opposite direction. So by dialing down to 3,200, for example, you're telling the camera that the light source is warm. So it moves everything up the spectrum to more cold blue to compensate back to neutral. That's why the lower you go, the colder the image gets, even though lower color temperature lights are warm. Does that make sense? All right, good. Stay with me. Now, if you want to get really creative, I've done videos about using gels on a flash and combining that with white balance to get unique looks. I'm going to put links to a couple of them down in the description below so you can check those out. But now that we know how white balance works, let's get to Mo's questions. The first part was whether it was important to set white balance in camera when shooting RAW or just fix it in post-processing. It's very important that he said shooting RAW. I've been talking about the importance of shooting RAW forever, and this is one of the reasons why. You see, a RAW file is simply the camera capturing and saving nearly all of the data from that sensor without any extra processing applied. And there are a number of settings in your camera that are really just little pieces of text metadata that tell the camera processor or the RAW converter program you're using in your computer which setting that you were shooting with at the time. These are things like picture styles, color space, high ISO noise reduction, image aspect ratio, and yes, white balance. Now, very, very important, if you're shooting JPEG only, which I hope you're not, but if you are, then those settings are baked into the file when you push the shutter button, and you really can't change them afterwards without causing some destruction to your image. You're very limited with what you can do on a JPEG and don't have much latitude to make adjustments. But RAW files don't apply those settings on capture. It may seem like they do because when you first open the file in a RAW converter program like Lightroom, Photoshop, or Capture One, it'll already have those settings applied. But that's just a convenience feature where the program reads the metadata of your settings and selects that as a starting point to help you out. But you can absolutely change the white balance in post-processing on a RAW file and have zero loss in quality. Now what I do is I shoot auto white balance 99.9% of the time, and it's usually pretty good at getting it right straight out of camera, and I know I'm going to change it later anyway. So why would you ever bother to set your white balance in the camera? Well, the only reason really would be when you absolutely want to see the correct color as you intend on the screen as you're shooting. In one of my other videos that I mentioned before, I was challenged to turn the sky green, and I accomplished that by using a custom white balance and a gel on my speed light. It was a tricky scenario, and I wanted to see what was happening with each adjustment, so I needed to set my white balance in camera. Now, if I'm working tethered to a computer and have someone else on a shoot looking at the pictures as I shoot them, maybe I'm showing them to the model, or possibly I have an art director on a big shoot, I want the colors to be pretty close right from the camera so they see it how I intend. Or if someone else is going to be editing my images, I used to transmit RAW files directly to the editors at Sports Illustrated when I worked there, and I wanted them to see the colors how I want them. So I would set my white balance in camera as much as I could. Now, in all of those situations, the white balance can and probably will be changed when the photos are edited, but there is some advantage to seeing the desired color straight out of camera. Now, Mo also asked about shooting a gray card. If you really want to make sure your images have neutral color, most cameras give you the option to select a custom white balance in camera. You usually do that by photographing a special card that's 18% gray with no color cast, and then telling the camera to use that image as a reference for neutral. Now again, it's non-destructive if you're shooting RAW, so you can still change it after the fact if you want. Even if you don't set a custom white balance in camera, there's a big advantage to shooting a gray card in the same light conditions as your other images. You can use that photo in post-processing to click white balance and then apply it to all of your other photos. That should give you accurate color across the board. So Mo, the answers to your questions are no, you don't really need to get your white balance exactly correct when shooting RAW, and yes, there is still a benefit to shooting a gray card so you can have something to white balance on later. Hope that helps you. Remember, you all can send in your own photo questions by going to askdavidbergman.com and filling out that form right there on the site. If you're not already a subscriber to the Adorama YouTube channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below and hit the little bell icon. That way you'll be notified as soon as new shows come out all week long from myself and all of the other photo hosts right here on Adorama TV. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you come back next time when I'll have another question to answer right here on Ask David Bergman.